Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com. You've joined us for an episode on the royal family and their role in Freemasonry. And while Freemasonry has been dubbed a secret society, it is also an organization with strong ties to the English royal family. Worshipful Brother Nicholas Broadway, the publisher of the Square magazine, returns to make sense of the vital role the royal family has played in our craft over the last 300 years. Welcome back to the Craftsman Online Podcast, Brother Broadway.
Welcome, Michael. Great to be back again. Nice to see you.
Most American Freemasons are very familiar with the connection between our founding fathers and also presidents who are also brothers of the craft. Some might be surprised to learn of the influence the royal family has held in English Freemasonry. So as we get this one started, I'm just curious, how well known is the royal family's role in Freemasonry with brethren and throughout the UK?
Well, certainly with brethren, it's very well known because our current Grand Master is the Prince, is Duke of Kent, and the cousin of the late Queen. And he's been a member for over 55 years. He celebrated 55 years in Freemasonry this year. So royalty and Freemasonry have gone hand in hand pretty much since the formation of Grand Lodge in 1717. So prior to 1717, there are some indications that monarchs have had an interest in Freemasonry, but most of that is sort of based on myth and legend. If any brother is interested in reading that through, they only really need to take a copy or have a look at a copy of the 1723 Anderson's Book of Constitutions, and there are some points made about connections to royalty. But today's talk, I think we will sort of focus really from 1717 to the present day.
What is interesting is you had kind of shared a passage or part of a charge from your EA or initiation degree that implies the crown's influence in the royal family. Can you share that with us?
Yes. So what I'm going to do is just read a couple of sentences from this particular charge. So this charge is given to every initiate at his initiation. So it starts off, I congratulate you on being admitted a member of our ancient honourable institution. Ancient, no doubt it is, having subsisted since time immemorial. And honourable it must be acknowledged to be, as by a natural tendency it conduces to make all those so who are obedient to its precepts. Indeed, no institution can boast a more solid foundation than that on which Freemasonry rests. The practice of every moral and social virtue, and to such a high eminence had its credits been advanced, that in every age monarchs themselves have been promoters of the art, have not thought it derogatory to their dignity to exchange the sceptre for the trowel, have participated in our mysteries and joined in our assemblies. Now, that is interesting. That's a fairly modern passage, I think, came around after the Union. But in that, we talk about here that monarchs have been promoters of the art and have exchanged the sceptre for the trowel. So when we start talking about monarchy in English Freemasonry, I'll come back to that part because that is a piece of factual information that. So we can talk about that.
To start it off is that if it's known, if it's established, and I feel a little awkward saying this to an Englishman, like I feel that some brothers that come into the craft when they are not pursuing the steps or the footsteps of George Washington, and when they see his pictures hanging in our lodges, or one of us says, oh, by the way, famous Freemasons, George Washington. Oh, that's right. I heard George Washington was a Freemason. Do you feel that connection to royalty draws men to the craft that may not have had an interest in it beforehand?
In the current time, I don't think so. Partly because the Duke of Kent is not such a predominant public figure of public in terms of royalty. But if we were to go back a few years, back to the time of Victoria, Queen Victoria and her son, the Prince of Wales, when he was made a Freemason and then became the Grand Master, he was an immensely popular character. And it's fair to say that he was a poster boy for Freemasonry and attracted a lot of members into the craft. And so it does have an effect, definitely. And if we go back further, so if we go back to the first quarter of the 18th century, we had dukes who were Grand Masters. The first Duke, Montague, in 1721. We had another Duke, Duke of Wharton. We had another Duke, the Duke of Richmond. So for quite at the very beginning, we had dukes who were the leading or the head of the craft, and it was made up with a lot of aristocracy and ruling classes. So people at those times who were movers and shakers joined Freemasonry to network with those kinds of people. But our first monarch was a Prince of Wales. Now, the Prince of Wales is a title given to the first-born male heir. So the Prince of Wales will always be the next monarch. So we've just had, obviously, when Prince Charles his mother was alive, the Queen was alive, he was the Prince of Wales, he became the monarch, and his son, Prince William, is automatically the Prince of Wales, so he'll be the next monarch. So whenever you hear, if I ever use the term Prince of Wales, that will be the firstborn son of the monarch who will become the king, but he won't be Grand Master when he becomes king. So he's Grand Master while he's not the monarch, but the moment he's the monarch, he relinquishes the title, and then another person will take his place. So we don't have in English history a king who is the Grand Master. He's still a Freemason, but he's not the Grand Master. So our first one is Frederick, Prince of Wales, and he was initiated very early on in 1737, and he was the first Grand Master. Now, when we're talking about English monarchy, from the early first quarter of the 18th century, we had a King George I, a King George II, King George III. It goes on. And we had a very long reign of Georges, and known as the Georgian era. And it wasn't until the last monarch, though he was called King William, he was still part of the Hanoverian house, part of the Georgian era, and then it was his daughter, Queen Victoria, who then became the Queen. So we've had George is on the throne for a long time, but all through the time from the early 18th century right up until the present day, on and off, there have been dukes or princes who have been Grand Masters of English Freemasonry.
Now, what does that mean in your jurisdiction? Because I'm sure the term Grand Master works on both sides of the ocean. We know here in the U.S. we have our jurisdictions, which would be almost states, but they go by jurisdiction, has a Grand Master that's the one Mason that rules all Masons, but just in that limited jurisdiction, that state that you happen to be in. How does that work in the UK?
English Freemasonry, we have the Grand Master, who currently is the Grand Master of United Grand Lodge of England. And then we split the country up by counties, which you might use the word states. So Essex is a county, Sussex, Lincolnshire. And each one of those counties has a provincial Grand Master. Typically, a provincial Grand Master will have a warrant to rule for 7 years.
Wow.
There's an option for a 3-year extension. more often than not, they'll do 3 years. So they've got a 10-year term. That's quite interesting because it does mean that they can set some plans in action and follow them through.
I would think so. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think of our brothers that they go through that 1 year as master of their lodge, or the maybe 1 or 2 years as grandmaster, and they come out, looking aged over time. I couldn't imagine 10 years leading an organization. That's impressive.
Well, the current grandmaster, His Highness the Duke of Kent, celebrated 55 years.
When you said that, I was like, 55 years. Now, we give aprons in some jurisdictions, or pins or honors to our 50-year members. He's been the Grand Master for 55 years. So there was probably a couple years, leading up to that, where he was just a brother in the 55 years as the premier figure. That's amazing.
Let's sort of put that a little bit into perspective. When a royal member of the royal household joins Freemasonry, he doesn't join a regular lodge, and he doesn't wait 6 months between each degree. Typically, what will happen is a lodge, one of the London lodges, Antiquity, or one of the other number 1, number 2 lodges, they will book a day, and the member of the royal family will come in and do the 1, 2, 3 in one day. Then he gets the rank of past grandmaster, which is an odd rank to have, but he gets the rank of a past grandmaster straight away. And then later on, if he's taking over, he will then take over as grandmaster. And it's all done by in closed doors, not the regular rank and file will be going to see that. What is also quite interesting, and we also have you would probably have a grandmaster and a deputy and an assistant grandmaster. Well, we have those. But if a member of the royal household is the Grand Master, we have an extra position called a Program Master. Now, a Program Master acts as the Grand Master when the Grand Master is not present. So, if as we currently have now a prince, the Duke of Kent, who is a member of the royal household, therefore we have a Program Master, and that Program Master will take his place when he's not present. The moment the Duke of Kent arrives and he's present at a meeting, that Program Master has no function whatsoever. His only function is to stand in for the Grand Master. And that would be true if a royal was a member of an ordinary lodge or the Grand Lodge. There's a Program Master in his place.
So, important question on that, because it's not necessarily a figurehead position. They do have an administrative role. So, traditionally, what role or influence have they had in English Freemasonry?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think, with the exception of one particular member of the royal household, which we'll discuss, I don't think many had a huge influence. The one I'm thinking of course, is the Duke of Sussex, and the Duke of Sussex was the Grand Master of the Moderns before it was united, and it was under his direction that we had the 2 Grand Lodges in England that came together. So the Duke of Sussex had a phenomenal influence on English Freemasonry, because he was the catalyst that really brought the 2 Grand Lodges together. But other than that, most of them are figureheads, I would say. But they also have a very positive influence, because Freemasonry has lasted 300 years in England, and during that time we've had a lot of members of the royal family, princes from the royal family, who have been members. And I'm going to talk about one now, which is he was a Duke of York. At an arranged meeting, special meeting, the Duke of York was initiated into the lodge. And at the following meeting, his brother was going to be initiated into the lodge. Now, at that particular time in history, the newest member, the last initiate, would act as inner guard for the lodge. And when the candidate comes in, today they come in and we present a poignard to their naked left breast. But in those days, it was a trowel that they presented to the naked left breast. So at that particular instance, for that meeting, that monarch literally did, he did exchange his scepter for a trowel for his brother's initiation. But that's the only time that in history that has taken place. If we go back to Duke of Sussex, who was the instigator of bringing the two lodges together, his brother, the Duke of Kent, was the Grand Master of the Ancients, the other Grand Lodge. So the two brothers were both Grand Masters, and they'd agreed at the outset that Sussex was going to take over of the United Grand Lodge. So that was obviously very handy that they both come to that agreement from the outset. But yeah, that was a pivotal point in English Freemasonry. I think if that hadn't have happened, we would still probably have the two Grand Lodges, and it would have been chaos.
Interesting. So as a Freemason yourself, have you been able to sit in lodge or attend a Masonic meeting or conference or session where the Grand Master, a royal family member, has been in the room or in the space?
I haven't personally, but yeah, I would be able to. I'm eligible to visit Grand Lodge at a quarterly communication when he's in place, but I haven't been to one of those meetings. The only time I've been to Grand Lodge is when the Grand Master's been in place.
Okay. I've appreciated this so much and on different levels. Like, one, it's always great to get any kind of Masonic education. My brain is like a sponge. I enjoy it. But you have turned the light on, and I don't want to embarrass myself or if this is coming from a place of love, is really the only exposure that I've had to the royal family and understanding is what we see in movies or television here in the U.S. So The Crown would probably be the latest storytelling of them. I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to understand not only who these people are as characters, but also what their role is in the royal family. So to me, this would be a great lodge presentation here in the U.S. for you to speak and educate us all on this. Do you have the same, or are the royal family members received kind of the same way as if a sitting president or governor or high-ranking political figure that'd be somewhat popular here in the U.S., if that person happened to be a Mason and came into a room, we have the talk here that we're all brothers, we're all at the same level, there are no special titles. Does that still exist in England?
I'm sure it does. I haven't met the Duke of Kent, though when he first became Grand Master, there's a lot of evidence that he did tour the country and tour various lodges, and he would attend meetings. But there would be an entourage of people with him. I mean, it'd be very difficult. The late Queen's husband, Prince Philip, he was a Mason, a Freemason. And it was interesting. Her father is said that told the prince, if you want to marry my daughter, you'll join the Freemasons. How true that is, one speculates. But he did join Royal Naval Lodge, and he did attend the lodge, and he was a subscribing member. He's a paying subscribing member up until he passed a few years ago. And he would attend meetings, but are often unannounced, because he wanted just to turn up and be one of the brothers at the meeting. He didn't want to announce his arrival, because then suddenly that lodge will be full of 1,000 people who want to meet him. He just wanted to turn up and be one of the lads and just enjoy it. And I think that's quite difficult for a member of the royal household to achieve. So if they did want to do that, they'd have to come along unannounced. And of course, now in today's world, security would just be an absolute nightmare. You know, you wouldn't rock up in a car and unannounced. You'd have an entourage of.
Right. Well, all I can think is it probably would be a blessing and a curse at the same time, because if you're the master planning for that meeting, you know you're going to have a full house. There's going to, right, and it might be the only Masonic meeting where brothers show up early instead of late and are seated and ready for the meeting for the gavel to drop. So it could be a good thing. I wanted to get back to, you had mentioned Queen Elizabeth's father. Well, I was going through the story and, you know, following the lineage, and while most of us, you know, the late Queen Elizabeth knew her, the world knew her, we respected her as the monarch of England. The fact that her uncle was the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England, how well did that sit with subjects? Because I'm curious as an American, where you hear the hint of somebody's involved with Freemasonry here and people think, oh, secret society, conspiracy. How do the English people feel about the role of the royal family in Freemasonry?
I don't think it's that public. Well, I'm just trying to think how to answer that. I don't think there's a big concern over it. The fact that we're talking now, it's the Queen's cousin, who the Duke of Kent's the Queen's cousin. I'm just trying to think how to best answer that. For the most rank and file people, I don't think it really triggers on their interest. They're more interested in the anecdotes of Prince Harry and what the latest fashion that Kate Middleton's Princess of Wales is wearing. So I don't think there is any hostility, but for the Queen's connection, or the royal family connection to Freemasonry. No, I don't see it. And when we're interviewing candidates for initiation, very few would understand that the Duke of Kent is a Freemason. It's not big news. It's
interesting.
News, no.
That is so. I guess, I mean, I was telling you that, you know, every presidential election cycle, especially now with how hyper divided and extreme, you know, the American political system is. I remember when then Senator Obama was running and went to shake John McCain's hand on a debate stage, and people were, you know, zooming in on that handshake and saying, "Oh, Obama's a Freemason. You can tell by his grip." And I'm like, no, he's not. Like, there's nothing peculiar about that handshake. That was just a handshake. And I always feel that if a modern presidential candidate was to reveal that they were a Freemason while seeking the presidential office, that could send some people over the edge, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, wasn't President Ford a Freemason?
That's our last known American Freemason president. Yeah.
I mean, in England, I don't think politicians join Freemasonry. I think they probably would find negative press, because the press always prefers negative press for clickbait. They wouldn't see positive in it. I think, as I said before, I think at this time, in this day and age, people aren't that too concerned about it. Certainly when the Queen's son, the Prince of Wales, Prince Albert, became the Grand Master, that was very public. But lodge meetings were published in the London papers. You could pick up a London paper and you could look on a column and they'd list all the meetings that were going on for the day.
Wow!
And then absolutely, it was a very, very different time. Freemasonry in England didn't become secret really until after the Second World War with the issues that went on in Europe, and with the conflict with Germany and Europe, and Freemasonry went underground, and people were sent to prison camps or extermination camps in mainland Europe at the time. So people were keeping it secret, literally, to save their own skins, their own lives. And I think since then it became more of a secret society. But prior to that, it was very public. You can find plenty of black and white photographs, press photographs of processions, men in Masonic aprons. When the Prince of Wales was made Grand Master, that was in the press. It was a very, very public affair. Wasn't seen as being a problem. I mean, I appreciate it in American history. You know, the Morgan affair probably did you more harm than a lot of harm. And you probably haven't really recovered much from that, where I think in England, what went on in Europe caused more European Freemasonry harm. And, that's the struggle. Now, of course, Freemasonry is really open. I mean, every lodge has a website and social media pages. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I think that also you're speaking also to like culturally, it's also different. Where America, we tend to know our leaders. We feel like, oh, that person is like me. There's another litmus test we have, which is could I have a beer with that guy or with that woman? Would I feel comfortable with them? Where in England, you're used to having a monarchy system with Parliament and that unique role that I think a lot of us have learned recently with the prime minister changes that have happened there this year. And we're like, wow, that's such a different, but yet, they both kind of produce the same outcome or the same. And I think they have some of the same values and obviously goals, just different ways of getting there. But yes, ultimately, I feel that if you were, having been a member of a lodge where at the time he was governor of New York, Franklin Roosevelt would come to our building and they had to make special modifications for it because he was in a wheelchair with polio and was going through all of that. And we had a special elevator, which is, now 100 years old and is very difficult for them to maintain just because the parts and the people that work on that have gone the way of, the way that it's gone. But those are the closest things that we can hold on to it. And I think when men come and find out, and at least on our side, there were, significant leaders that were influential in our life that were also Freemasons. Oh, that's kind of neat. Where in England, I feel that because so much of it is open, that there's less mystery about it almost.
No, I agree. We've had the last prime minister that I can think of who publicly we know as a Freemason was Winston Churchill. But the reality is he joined just after 1902-03, resigned Freemasonry about 1912, I think it was. But he didn't come to be prime minister until the 30s. So though there's a lot of press that Churchill was a Freemason, he was long resigned a Freemason before he became prime minister. And I don't think there's been any other prime ministers that I know of that have been Freemasons since that. So I think in England, we certainly separate political and general politics from Freemasonry.
That's a good thing, and that's a great place for us to leave this episode. Brother Broadway, publisher of the Square Magazine, thank you so much again for coming back on the Craftsman Online podcast.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. I look forward to the next time.
Oh, I can't wait. We're getting close. I think we have one more episode with you, and then we get ready for 2023. If you've enjoyed our podcast and you want to hear more, you can tell Siri or Alexa to play the Craftsman Online podcast. We are available on all streaming platforms with new episodes every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.